Everybody excited to get ChatGPT inside of FileMaker?
Yes.
You're going to be so disappointed. Awesome. I'll just wait 30 seconds. I know we've got this room is completely full. We're doing an overflow into next room, so I'll just give it like 30 seconds before we get started. But before we do, I just want to tell you how excited I am. We haven't been in person and engaged for several years, and I get to kick it off talking about two of my favorite subjects, FileMaker and AI. So I can't tell you how excited I am. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to have a lot of fun. There's a lot of stuff here. I've got a lot of content. Too much. As a matter of fact, I had to cut down a couple of things. Maybe we can make this into a webinar and add some more stuff over here. So we'll have a lot of fun. Cool. All right. I think we'll get started. We'll kick it off. All right. This is not, just to be sure, this is not about adding ChatGPT into your FileMaker applications. This is not what this is about. This is about really leveraging AI and bringing new experiences to your users in your applications. This is also not about new features in FileMaker. That's tomorrow. This is all about using the current version of FileMaker, the ones you have right now, and leveraging AI to bring just really amazing AI-driven experiences to your users. So again, we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to show you a lot of things. But just raise your hand. How many of you use chatbots like ChatGPT, Claude? Raise your hand. Wow. Awesome. I do too. I use it all the time. I use all of them. I even have installed locally. I've got open source models that I run. I do it for all sorts of things. I use it to convert text, to have it check things that I write, and to do all sorts of really cool things that it can do. But I'm a FileMaker developer. After a while, I got tired of opening brand new chats, brand new windows, and typing the exact same thing. And so as a FileMaker developer, I just wanted to go ahead and immediately start automating things. So, want to see something cool?
Sure.
Let's get started. So I did exactly that. I automated that. I was tired of writing all that stuff. So I created a little FileMaker app to help me take all the stuff that I was doing all the time and made them into little apps. So I've got these little apps over here that are powered by large language models. Some of them are really cool. Some of them are just silly, quite honestly. But they're all driven by large language models. And they all work the same way. If you've got some one or more input fields that the user will type in something, you click on it, it goes to an LLM, and then produces the results. So I'll show you a quick example. I've got this one over here that helps me give me a list of tables that I might need for any particular application. So I'll write here description, in this case for project management, click on the button, and it'll give me a list of tables that I might use. Pretty cool, right? So I've got all sorts of little apps here. I can create new ones. I can delete if I don't want one anymore. I can even copy it and take this into another FileMaker if this one is useful and replicate it. I can even do some configurations. Now, here's a really cool part if you don't think that was cool enough. Not only are these driven by LLMs, they're actually created by an LLM. So when I want a new one, click on the new button over here, and I literally describe what I want. In this case, I want to convert just feedback from customers into a JSON object so I can easily parse it, right? For a ticketing system, click on the create button. And there you go, my little new app that does exactly that. And I'll show you behind the scenes what it generated. It actually created the name for it. I didn't specify that. Here's the description, what data type it thinks is going to generate. Here are the parameters, that field, that user field right there, complete with name, description, and even the data type it's going to be. And here's the prompt. It actually wrote a prompt for itself. Isn't that cool? And it even created an example so that it can help itself, right, generate those the next time it runs. Isn't that awesome? Again, we're developers, right? We're FileMakers. We want to automate everything. And so I will release this file later on so you guys can play around with it and use it. I thought it would be really cool. But here, run a quick example of it. Take an email text, run it, make sure that it runs, that's exactly what it does. And yeah, there you go. You got a JSON object, right, that you can replicate. All right, so that's the kind of stuff that we're going to be talking about today. So here's the agenda at a high level. I'll try to do a quick intro, talk about some of the concepts that we're going to be using throughout the session. I'll talk about some of the tools and things on how to get started. Then we'll jump right into examples. In FileMaker, we'll look at scripts, we'll look at prompts, we'll look at everything to get you up and running so you kind of get the gist of the mechanics of everything. I'll try to share some tips of things I've learned that might help you in your own AI journey. We'll talk about what to do after the session, and hopefully we'll have time for Q&A here. So we got a lot, so let's get started. All right, so first things first, there are a lot of definitions of AI out there, but I thought it would be good for us to kind of center on one for at least this session. This is the one I like, and this is the one I use when I'm looking at possible opportunities of using AI in applications. So it reads, the theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence. And that's that last part that I really like, right? Tasks that normally require human intelligence. You know, as FileMaker developers, we are always looking at automating things. We've been automating things for many years, and a lot of the stuff that we're automating now, we couldn't a while back, right? And so AI allows us to then now perform and automate tasks that until very recently were very difficult or impossible to automate. And I think that's really the amazing part of this. We can now bring things and make a much smoother process for our users and make a much greater experience, remove them from those mundane tasks that would require human intelligence and have them focus on much more complicated things. So why is it important? I mean, obviously, we can get more time in automating things, but because we can remove a lot of that friction and a lot of those tasks from users, you think about it, a lot of our applications are built around a lot of those tasks. And so if we start removing those things and automating things, I believe AI can really transform the way that we access information and the way we interact with software. And that makes us, right, the drivers of that. We're the pilots of that transformation. So I think it's really important for all of us to understand the potential and how we can apply it, and so it can make the lives of our users a lot better. So you heard last night during the keynote, Brad, and we've said this many times, we are your partner, right? We have been for decades. And I think it's very important for you to understand as a partner where your partner stands. And so I'd like to just take a moment to talk to you about how we're viewing AI and how we're approaching AI from different standpoints. The first part is we're really looking at AI from an ethical standpoint. We want to make sure that we approach it there, we uphold the highest ethical standards possible, making sure that everything that we do does not infringe in any privacy or any human rights whatsoever. Right? The second thing is that we've always been customer-centric. AI is no different. We're always going to try to make sure that everything that we do is centered about your needs and make sure that it solves for the things that you guys want to do. And lastly, you've heard us say this many times, right? We're an Apple company. And as Brad said last night, we want to make sure that we align with Apple and we leverage Apple where it makes sense. AI is absolutely one of those. We're leveraging their expertise, their knowledge to accelerate our own progress so we can make sure that we bring the best possible products in AI as quickly as possible. So with that, let's get started. Go to the fun part. All right, so let's talk about the FileMaker tools. And this is going to be a lot smaller than you think it's going to be. I'm assuming everybody here is a FileMaker developer. And so we're going to talk about mostly not the stuff that you're constantly using, but the things that you might need in order to talk directly to the different models that you're going to be using for AI. There's not a lot. It's not really that much. But first off, let's rekindle some things that we've had in the past. If you did not know, FileMaker already has had for many years AI functionality inside. We actually have a complete function called compute model that allows you to run models locally on device. Okay? The compute model function takes core ML models, runs them on device. It means you don't have to send data anywhere. It stays completely there on those devices. It works even on mobile devices. So you don't have to send data, and it's very, very fast. Now, when you have to talk to models that are outside of your system through APIs, then we have, right, the printable insert from URL script step. But we also, guess what? We have an entire product dedicated to talking to APIs. We have Claris Connect. And we've fairly recently introduced a new script step called Trigger Claris Connect Flow. That makes it even easier to talk to Claris Connect. So that way you can talk to other APIs, talk to models through APIs. I highly recommend Claris Connect. Not because I worked on it, but for production, Claris Connect is very fast. It's scalable. It's secure. It keeps track of changes. Like all the stuff that you would normally have to code in your scripts, Connect can take care of it. And so you can offload a lot of the heavy lifting that you have, and the whole replicating all these things. You can just let Connect do it and call it for multiple applications. So it's really, really good. I have no problem like testing things with insert from URL script step, but if you're going to go to production, whenever possible, I'd say, yeah, use Connect. All right, so that's talking about those things, we mentioned the compute model. The compute model is set up right now to run Core ML models. And so if you're not familiar, Core ML is a machine learning framework developed by Apple. It runs completely on device, as I mentioned. It is optimized for Apple hardware, so it runs on, actually right now only runs on Apple hardware. But because it's designed on it, it leverages all the advancements and all the functionality in the hardware of Apple devices. So that means it takes advantage of the CPU, the GPU, the neural engine chipset that Apple puts in all those devices. What that means, that translates, is that it has a very small footprint, very little memory and CPU requirements, and power requirements as well. The other thing is that, sorry, that's too fast, is that you can take models from, clicker keeps on. You can take models from TensorFlow and PyTorch and convert them over to Core ML. So there's a bunch of models already out, pre-trained models that you can bring in, convert them, and have them run on Core ML. So I have a quick demo if you haven't seen Core ML in FileMaker. You can use it for all sorts of things. It's really cool. I got here an example of doing what's called sentiment analysis. So let's say, for example, you've got a review and you want to determine whether or not the review is positive, negative, or neutral. And so this one, definitely negative. Yeah? All right. And then here's another example of using what's called regression. And regression is used a lot to estimate or predict a value based on other variables. And in this case, we're trying to predict how many hours we might bill a customer in the first year as we onboard them, before we make them a client. So it helps the salesperson figure out how much they want to put in to really get that customer. And it's all based off of existing data. So this model is custom trained on existing data, on our history, and now is able to predict, to give an estimate of what it believes. A lot of times we've got like 1 or 2 employees there that have been there for so long, and they can just look at the stuff and say, yeah, I know exactly what's going to happen, right? This is about unlocking that, taking that out of your data, and making it available to everybody. So you have that know-how unlocked and even be able to automate it. All right, so that's Core ML. I know a lot of you are really excited about all this new stuff about large language models and generative AI, so let's go ahead and talk about that. So let's define a little bit large language models. These large language models are a type of AI program that is really geared about generating and processing natural language, right? It's able to ingest and produce and perform tasks that are normally associated with natural language. They are trained on a vast amount of data, hence the name large. But it is massive, the amount of data. And what that means also as well is that because of that, they've ingest all this natural language information, they're able to mimic the way that we write and process language. So they can do things like generate text and answer questions and things like that, do translations, convert text from different formats. So they can perform all these really amazing tasks, which make them very, very useful. Now they run on probabilities. What they're actually doing is trying to guess what's the next word, the next phrase, or the next sentence, paragraph. They're not really thinking per se. It's you know, on your phone when you're writing, you have that autofill that's trying to predict the next. That's exactly what it's doing at a very large scale. But that's exactly what it's doing. It's just trying to guess what the next thing is. So in a large one, you're talking to a model, the way it works is that you're providing an input to it. It's normally referred to as a prompt. So you're providing some text. That input goes in. And again, it's trying to predict what goes next. So the output of these models is what's called the completion, because it's trying to complete what you provided as a prompt, as the entry. So as an example, if you were to provide a sentence like this, in simple terms, photosynthesis is, it's going to try to calculate what's the probability that the next word is how, or that, or the, right? And then choose the highest one, and to put that one there. And then it's going to try to calculate the probability of the next word, and then the next, and the next, and the next. And then it might come up with an answer that may be something like this. Now, as developers, we do some things that are a little bit more complicated than that. We normally talk through APIs, through a chat completion, not a sentence completion. We normally are using our prompts, or not just a sentence, but a whole thread of conversation. We're sending in what would be the history of a conversation between two or more actors. Right? And then what the model is trying to do is predict what's the answer of one of those actors. Most of the time, the AI itself. Right? What would be the next entry in that conversation, in that chat conversation? So that's what the completion is. Now, when you're sending the prompt to these APIs, most of the time it takes the form of a JSON array that looks something like this. You'll notice that here there's the role, this is like who the actor is, and the content refers to what the message in there is. Now you notice that there's a few roles in there in that chat, right? Who are the actors? The user is most of the time it's the human. That's where your queries go in those requests. The assistant represents the AI. There's a third role. There are others, but there's a third role that's very common nowadays, which is called the system. And the system usually is the first one. It's optional, but it helps set the behavior that you want the AI to have throughout the conversation. And I'll use that, and we'll see a few examples of that here as well. All right. And after that, let's go look at some really cool use cases. So I've got 3 use cases. We'll go through these, go a little bit deep whenever possible, look at the scripts and all that fun stuff. All right, first thing everybody asks me is, as a FileMaker developer, and I talk about AI, they say, all right, can it do what? Can it write scripts? Can it write calculations? Right? Because we're always thinking about how can we make our lives a lot easier. Short answer is, yes, it can. It absolutely can. So I wrote this little application to do that, do exactly that. It generates calculations. Now some caveats, right? I really scoped down what I want to do for this app itself. First one is, I had the model focus on the answer. I did not want it to focus on best practices for the calculation. I wasn't worried about efficiency or anything like that. I wanted to focus on being able to produce an answer and leverage the calculation engine in order to get to the answer. I'm also specifying that I do not want recursion, right? I wanted to write a calculation, not a custom function. You can create custom functions with it, but that was not the intention here, and that's important. You should be very specific on what is your intention, what is it you want to do. So no recursion. I also want it to be self-contained, right? I don't want it to have access to the outside world, no data, everything should be on the inside. For my example, that's not means you can't do it. And then the other thing you'll see, I'm asking it to produce as much comment inside the calculation itself for a lot of reasons. One, large language models are very chatty. They love to talk. But the more they can put it inside the expression, the better the documentation. And so I really wanted it to do that. So let's have a quick show here of what it looks like, what the application looks like. So first thing, I'm going to create a new one, new calculation, give it a name. And this one, just to show off that it can actually get access to different providers. And then this one is trying to get the height and width of the current window. I think all of us know how to create that calculation. Wait a few seconds. And there you go. It wrote the calculation. You see the bottom here, the results of that calculation. Right? So I'm just using an evaluate to get the results there. Second one is a little bit more complicated. Right? That was fairly straightforward. The second one is generating random numbers. I want 20 random numbers. I think we all know what it's going to be. You're going to need to loop that in order to create a list. I did not edit for time. And there you go. Actually use a while loop. And here's the results here at the bottom, 20 random numbers. Next one, my favorite. I love Fibonacci sequence. We all learn it, right? So I'm asking it to generate the first 15 numbers of the Fibonacci sequence. Once again, give it a few seconds. And there you go, complete with a lot of comments inline and even outside. Yeah, actually pretty good. It's actually pretty good at it. Cool? All right, so let's see how in the world does that work. All right, from a scripting standpoint, it's actually fairly simple. And I'm going to sound like a broken record on that one. There's actually less than 30 lines on the main script that runs this, believe it or not. the real secret about this whole thing is the prompt. And you're going to hear me say that a lot, unfortunately. So let me show you what I mean by that. Let's jump out of here. Let's go into FileMaker. Wrong one. And show you the script. And this is basically it. There are other scripts in here. There's a few others. Most of it's really just about the UI and cleaning up some stuff. But this is the one and only. This is the script that runs everything. So at first here, we're preparing the prompt. Remember I said this is all creating that array. We have that prompt in there. I'm preparing all the other variables to send to the API. Literally calling the API over here using the insert from URL script step, checking some errors, check error detection over here. Here we're just parsing the response back. It's just JSON, so we've got to parse those out, extract here the expression, the calculation expression from the parse data, and then we set the field with the expression and evaluate it. That's it. That's all it does. From a FileMaker standpoint, that is as complex as it gets. The other things are just really a bunch of UI stuff. So once again, the secret really is in the prompt. So what do I mean by that? So in the prompt, I actually am using a role. I am indicating, letting the AI know that I want it to act in a particular way, right? Setting up kind of a persona for it. I'm setting quite a bit of constraints for it, making sure that it understands what are the requirements that I'm going to be asking for in there. And it's employing a prompt engineering technique called few shots. That means examples. So I'm providing several examples to it so that it can follow the pattern. These models are really good at recognizing and following patterns. So I take advantage of that. So I'll show you this a little bit better so you don't have to take photos. So normally this would be, right, when you send this off, it's going to be an array. But I broke it up here into this document so it can be easier for us to read. Hope you appreciate it. So, all right, so we start off, I said, remember the system, right? This is the first message. All of these things, right, would be normally in an array. And so the first message is the system role, right? It's the one that goes from the system role. And so we'll break it down. First line here, I'm letting you know, I want you to act as a FileMaker calculation expression generator. And I use the word FileMaker. Here's one of the great advantages that we have. Like I said, remember I said that these models are trained on vast amount of data. It's a lot of public data. We've been around for 30 years. It's impossible for it not to know what FileMaker is. And it's great. It's really great for it. It works in our advantage. So almost every model I've ever come across knows what FileMaker is and has some idea of our calculation and our scripts, so which is fantastic. So I let it know from the get-go, I want you to act as a FileMaker calculation generator. Then it's like a little bit more specific. Your task, right? This is what you're going to be doing. You're going to be generating calculation expressions to get to a goal, right? Depending on what the user is going to ask you. I want you to focus on the goal. I want you to focus on the answer, literally in natural language. And then I'm going to give it some constraints, right? Some requirements that it needs to follow in order to achieve this goal. So let's break it down. The first one, no recursion. I do not want you to use recursion. This is not a custom function. You cannot use that. And I specifically tell it, if you need to loop, you're going to use the while function. And I even give it the structure of it because I found out that I'm not the only one who struggles with the while function. So models, and here's the thing, right? The while function is fairly new, so there's not a lot of training data, right? They're not training a lot of that, so it kind of forgets. So providing that structure there helps it a lot. Yeah. The other thing is I told it here, remember I said, I want these calculations to be used in a calculation field. I want to constrain. You're not a custom function. You're not writing custom functions. You cannot access custom functions. So nothing I haven't predefined before is available to you. And that includes data. You have no access to any outside data. Anything that you need needs to be declared inside the calculation. It needs to be referenced internally there as well. And here goes for the comments. I want you to include any explanation, any and all explanation, or most of it, inside. Again, they're very chatty, and they tend to want to explain everything that they do and why they do it. So I said, you know what? Try to focus on putting that explanation inside of the calculation as much as possible. The last one I wrote here is optional. On the bigger models, you don't have to tell it which functions to use because, again, they've ingested all that. It's like they've got 30 years of all that stuff in there. So I don't have to. But in some of the smaller models, it helps if you include a list of the functions, of the FileMaker functions. You get that from documentation, copy and paste it in there. You If you want to, another thing I found out, if you wanted to constrain it, maybe you're building this for just text, like text parsing or text manipulation, you can just put a list of the text functions in there and say, hey, you can only use these. Like, don't do anything else. And you can use that. So that's a good way for you to constrain the scope if you wanted to do such a thing. All right, so that's the system. All the other ones are examples. So here's a cool thing. This array gets sent, this entire array gets sent every single time with every single request. As far as the model is concerned, this is a conversation that they've been having with the user. They're not very smart that way. Okay? So they don't know. They don't know that that it's not true. But we're telling them, hey, you've been having this conversation with the user. Here's what the user said, and this is what you said in response back. And so it's going to try to continue that pattern. So we're saying here the user asked to calculate the square root of 113 and asked that the output be number. And you responded this way. Now notice I put some delimiters at the beginning and at the end. It's really good for parsing later on the response. You can use whatever you want, but it's a good idea to use some sort of delimiter there. So with this, we're telling it, hey, this is what you responded. And then the user asked for the name of the current user. And then you responded, and then the model starts to think, oh, okay, there's a pattern here. And then the user asked for first 20 numbers of Fibonacci sequence, and then you responded this. This one also helped having an example of the while loop, because, right, again, just like me, they struggle, and put in there. So every single time you're asking for something, you're saying this entire thing, and it recognizes the pattern, and it wants to answer in the same way, which works in our benefit. That is it. That is the extent of the complication of this. So you put all those things together, and you're generating calculations. That's it. That's really at the extent of that. Let's look at another one. This one's really cool. I really like this one. This is about using natural language to perform finds in FileMaker. So we're using here find by natural language. This example is going to use natural language converted to JSON, which I think is one of the best utilizations of these models. The other thing is it's using the native FileMaker find, which has so many advantages. It's very, very fast. It's so good. The other thing is that this implementation is completely layout agnostic. It doesn't matter. Once you have it running, it'll run on every single layout, which, again, is really nice. Because it's not sending really any data and it's performing the find locally, it is wicked fast. Let me show you. So this is a little application. It's a little CRM, one of our templates. And I'm going to write over here to find companies in New York and Indiana. I'm hijacking the quick find. Hit the return button. And there you go. The found set is now all New York and Indiana. Isn't that cool? Yeah. All right. So here's change the layout. I want to go find here organizations that have a librarian. And that's information in a portal, right? The contacts portal. Hit the return key. There you go. It found 9 organizations that have at least one contact as a librarian. Now, I built this to use both the quick find, but it also has this little popover that you can use if you don't want to use a quick find. And I added a little option over here that shows request, because behind the scene, it is actually performing a find request. So if I turn this on, what it's going to do is it's going to pause the script so you can see the find request. So let's say we're going to search for every organization that Sarah contacted in June of 2021, right? Hit find, and the script actually pauses. This is the find request. I actually wrote it right there. That's what I wrote. Oh. And so then now I can just click on continue, and it performs a find. There you go. Only one organization contacted by Sarah. So she didn't work a lot that month. I don't know. Yeah. So I'll continue to do a couple of other finds just so you can continue to see that. Still have the option turned on. We'll look for organizations that have a dog trainer in their contacts. And so again, it's going to pause here. That's the find request. Continue. And we found 11. Now, pay attention here. There's 11 records in this found set. And I'm going to switch over to list view so that you can see this next one. I'm going to ask here to limit this to companies in California. Hit the return. It's going to pause, right? Wrote CA, right? And continue. And it constrained the found set from 11 to 3. So it knows the difference between constrain, extend, and performing a regular find. Pretty cool. I like that. All right, so how does that work? Thank you. So how does it work? The same work that we would work normally, right? The user writes a request. So in this case, let's say, for example, companies with a name that starts with P and ends with I. I can see people already here like thinking, yeah, I know how to write that. That's a P asterisk I, right? Okay, that's exactly what I'm asking the model to do. So I'm sending that request to the model, and the model is going to return that in a structured way, in a JSON specifically, that I can later parse out and use using my regular FileMaker tools to execute that using a regular find and using a set field by name, right? I think most of us, if we got that JSON, we can do the rest. That's not hard, right? So from a scripting standpoint, there's basically 2 scripts, right, to do exactly what we just saw there. One sends a request, prepares all the information, sends over the request so that the model has all the instructions, sends back that JSON object, and then we have another script that performs a find based off of that JSON object. So once again, scripting is not that complicated. Let's go look at it. So here's the app. Here's script number 1. So this one is the one that sends the information, sends a request to the LLM. It is very, very simple. It's basically just calling an API. So here I'm preparing, all of these things here are just about preparing all the information that's going to be sent to the API. So you can see here all the messages, right, like that chat information we were talking about before. Over here, we're just calling, right, calling the API, insert from URL script step, checking for errors, checking for any errors, and then sending back the results. That's it. It is basically an API call. It's nothing more to it. But now, once we got the JSON object, then we pass it along to this script that then parses that. We take that. The parameters is that JSON object that we saw, right? It goes into find mode. And then we've got a nested loop that goes through that processes that. We got one outer loop that goes through the request, because you can have multiple requests, right? Like for omit and things like that. It understands multiple requests. And then for each one of those requests, it loops through all the fields. And then using a set field by name to set the value, the search criteria in there. And then last but not least, then it actually performs a find and either performs a constrain, extend, or a regular find. That is it. It literally is 5 scripts. 2 of them, you can compress into 1. I was just lazy. But that's it. There's just those 2 scripts for the most part. So again, the secret sauce got to be somewhere else, right? It's in the prompt. It's how we ask the model to do that. So once again, I'm using the role. I'm going to set the behavior for it. I want you to act in a particular way. I'm going to request a JSON. I'm specifically going to ask it that its response be in a structured way, in a very, very specific way. And again, I'm going to be using some example. We're going to lead by example using a few shots approach. So let's have a quick look at what the prompt looks like. All right. So here's our system entry over here. Once again, I'm letting it know this is the way I want you to behave. You're going to act as a smart find system for a CRM app. Written in different ways here. I want you to take what the user writes, and I want you to return that in a criteria in JSON. You must return JSON. If you didn't understand the first time, here's the second time. You have to. And then a third time, it has to be JSON. And then a fourth time, it's not just JSON. I want you to follow this very particular structure. And I'm doing that to let it know what structure I want. I'm using what's called JSON schema, just a way of documenting structures for JSON, very well known. Almost every model knows it because there's so much documentation. It's used so much and so often. So this just describes the format that I want. I came up with that format. There's no proprietary thing. You could use anything that you want. But you can specify it there, and it will follow it as much as it can. And then here's some constraints I want. It's like, hey, here are your operators. I gave it all the operators that FileMaker has. I literally copied and pasted from our documentation. The only change I did do was here for the range one, I did say, hey, you can also use it for dates, just in case. So I think we can update that in our documentation. Then finally, here, I let it know, hey, here are the fields that are available right now. And so this is a placeholder. So when you're running in the scripts, we've got functions in FileMaker. I can just get a list of all the fields that are currently in that layout, and I just put it in here with a substitute. And so every time it knows which fields are in there at that particular point in time. And then we got a lot of examples, right? So I say, hey, in our past conversation, the user asked for organization with a C, but not in Texas. And this is what you responded. Just a JSON, no chattiness, you didn't explain anything, you just gave me the JSON object. This is what it looks like. And then in another occasion, the user asked for this, asked for companies that are in New York, to add companies that are in New York to the current found set. So you responded like this. This is an example of extending the found set. And then over and over and over and over and over again. And again, once you add the last one there, it follows, it wants to follow that pattern and then answer with the right JSON object.
Very cool.
Thank you. I hope you're getting the patterns. Like, this is not hard. You don't need a PhD in anything. Like, this is really just natural language. You're talking to it almost as if it were a toddler. You're really just giving it all the instructions, playing clear. One last one. You guys saw this one last night, but we're going to talk about this, and I want to show you a little bit more about it that I didn't show last night. So, quiz for coming here. All right. So this one is totally about generating charts, because I think this one is just really dear to me because I've spent a lot of time creating charts for other people. So this one does generate SQL statements. Warning here. This is a huge challenge in the AI community, taking natural language and generating SQL. And the reason is you got to be careful because you have to validate it a lot. It's not that it can't write SQL, it's that you have to make sure that, one, it's valid, right? There's no syntax errors. You know, a little typo in SQL means a big deal. And then even if it's valid, you got to make sure that it's accurate, that it's actually returning what you want it to return. So you got to make sure that make sure that it does exactly what it's supposed to do. Everything is correct. Reducing the scope, making sure you provide the best instructions as possible goes a very, very long way. So with those caveats, right, it runs. It works very well. Just make sure that you understand the pitfalls there. In this example, there's actually no data exchange. I'm not sending any of my data to the model. I'm only sending instructions, and it's sending back settings for me, which is really cool. There's two advantages of that. One, security, privacy, and all that fun stuff, sure. But that also makes it very, very fast because it's sending very little back to me. And so that exchange coming back, what you saw last night, was real time. Like, that's how fast it really runs. So I'll show you another part of that demo that I didn't show last night because you guys came here. So this dashboard is built on a concept of having widgets so that the user can create these widgets and put them on a dashboard. And right now it supports charts and what I call indicators. Indicators is just like a single piece of text or number that they can put anywhere there that helps them give some information. So when I create an indicator, you choose here, put in the description that I want, in this case trying to figure out the sales cycle length, so the average time it takes us to close a deal. Click on the button. And that's how long it really took. Scroll down. Here's the SQL that I generated. And here are the settings that I'm going to be using. Now for indicators, I allow text or numbers, just because I format them differently. So I'll change those into number. And so I can do some cropping, some rounding so it looks nice. And then the user can use all of these that they create and put them anywhere here in the dashboard. It's really cool. So that way they can have completely custom dashboard and they don't ever have to call me again. Not that I don't like them. But here's a cool thing, right? Because it's SQL, I didn't show this yesterday on how to send the relationship graph. You guys get to get a sneak peek. Guess what? It does not use it at all. I'm not saying you should do this. But there is no relationships in here. I forgot to do it, and at the end of the day, I was like, I don't need it. It's just for demo. And so what I wanted to bring this up is that one of the advantages of using SQL is that it's not bound by the context here, which gives it one of the advantages. There's pros and cons to it, but I think this is a really cool pro because it gives the user free range to think about what they want to do. So I thought that was pretty cool. All right, so how does this work? From a scripting standpoint, there's only one main script. Everything else is just really about UI and stuff like that. So just really one script there. That script calls the model, generates some SQL, and generates some settings that then I can process locally. So we run the SQL completely local. Again, there's no data exchange, running that locally. And then we do some UI. The chart is completely calculated. Right? The chart objects in FileMaker, remember there's an option that you can put whatever you want, but you can also use a calculation. I'm absolutely taking full advantage of that. So let's have a quick look at what it looks like. All right. Like I said, there's just basically one script. Everything else here, there's a few other scripts. But they're all about UI, cleaning up, and stuff like that. So first off here, this one I wrote right now is using OpenAI, and I've tested with several models using the fastest one, but it works with other companies as well. Just leave it there as that. So this section here about preparing the prompt. It's a template. There's some substitutions that happen in here. So there's basically two prompts, one for chart, one for the indicator. They're almost identical, except just because of the format of the JSON. I'm taking here the input, the description that the user provided, and putting that into the prompt template. We're putting in here the database schema, injecting that in there, consolidating everything, and putting all the parameters to make the API call. We call the API, parse the response, do some special case here in that response. SQL, about checking SQL. So here we check SQL, make sure that there's actually a query that came back. We double check it again. There's actually there's an extra check here, and there's actually one I didn't do here. The only thing it doesn't check here is if it's accurate, and I'm expecting the user to see and say, oh yeah, this is not right, and run it again if they have to. And then we're saving the settings. And then finally, we're setting that up and we're moving into the correct panel. So the reason my little trickery is that there's all the charts are in slide panels, and I just switched panels. Yeah, that's it, right? It's a little FileMaker trick. And so that's what I'm doing here. So it's just a little UI thing. But that's it. That's the whole script. Everything you saw there runs off of this one script right there. I know, it sounds too simple. All right, broken record. Everything really is in the prompt. Here's the magic part. Again, setting the role. I really like to set, I like role playing here with the AI. It works really, really well. And I set constraints. And in this one, I set a lot of constraints. The other thing, I am forcing it again to generate JSON in a very particular way. And here's a cool part. There are 0 examples. It's a 0-shot one. Not cool? All right, so let's have a quick look at what this prompt looks like. All right, so here's my system. Starting right off the bat, you're going to act as such. You can generate charts for the user, depending on what the user describes. Immediately after, here's the database schema. This is a placeholder because I'm gathering that. I try to make this as portable as possible. So I inject the database schema like a SQL, right? So including all the tables and all the field names in there so that it knows what's there. And then we got constraints. All of this is to help the model create valid SQL statements for FileMaker. FileMaker has its requirements for SQL. So in order to help it create valid SQL, all this thing that I'm not going to go through it, but all this was trial and error, making sure that I got the best possible opportunity to get a valid SQL statement back from it. And it works pretty well. Then, last but not least, is the user. And this is the last thing. So I take here and say, hey, this is what the user wants, and I insert whatever the description was and put it there in the prompt. That is basically it. The only other thing I'll show here, what's the JSON schema that I ask it to do. I was like, hey, you're going to follow this. This is the schema that I want you to follow. Again, it's something that I came up with because I want to know, make sure that it follows a particular structure so that I can make it easy for me to then parse it out later. That's about it. That's as complicated as it gets. Cool. Yeah. I'm hoping you get the message that this is not hard. If I can do it, if that's it, I hope you walk away from here saying, I can do that. That's not hard. I can absolutely do that. So to help you out with that, I'm going to try to help you out, give you a couple of tips that help me out, and hopefully it helps you out in your own journey. First off, if you're going to be using classification and regression type models like the core ML models that we talked about earlier, your data is really what's important. Both for the inference and also if you're going to be training your own models, that is what's key. We've got, I mean, this audience here has decades of data in a lot of situations. You've got a lot of it. There's gold in there. We got to take care of it though, right? We got to clean it up. There's a lot of taking care of that needs to happen in there, but it is there. And there's a lot, really great stuff that can be unlocked using these models. The other thing is if you're looking for opportunities, I would start with looking at where your users are trying to they're guessing things or creating estimations. So think of it, think of like, inventory restocking levels and things like that, or how many hours is this project going to take? How many people are we going to need for this other, for tomorrow? Things like that, where there's usually somebody there who has a lot of experience and can look at it and says, oh yeah, I know exactly how much. Chances are you've got data that can help you create models to help you estimate those things. When it comes to generative AI, especially with large language models, some of the things that I like to think of, once I kind of got this in my mental state, think of the model as an intern who is very eager to learn. The new intern, just fresh out of college, has a lot of general knowledge, but knows nothing about you or your organization. But they can do a lot of things. If you explain things, plain English, right, or Spanish, they explain things, they can do a lot. They have a lot of potential. You just have to explain it, give it enough context in order for them to perform the task. So if you think about them that way, they are extremely useful. The other thing is aim for small responses back. This is for performance. So when you're talking to it, the time that it takes, what's really happening, right? Most of the time it's going to take from processing the data that you send, right? Sending the data, processing it, generating the data, and sending it back. Out of all of those, what takes the most amount of time is generating. So if you can make that as small as possible, you'll get the fastest performance out of it. The other thing is you have access to a lot of models. There's commercial models and open source models. Highly recommend that you have an idea, prototype it with one of the big models out there and see if it works. If it doesn't work with the big ones, chances are you're not going to get it to work with anything else. But once you do, start looking at open source models. Start looking at running things locally with different models and having it work with those for a lot of reasons. One of them is cost, right? Because once you put things in production, things are going to scale and cost comes into the conversation. It's really good to have things working nicely just for yourself prototyping, but you got to think about what does this look like when you scale this up. The other thing is just in general, we got to learn. There's a lot for us to learn. I am still learning. I am so early in my journey. There's a lot for me to learn. And especially when it comes to prompt engineering, it's really all about practice, practice, practice. There's just a lot of trial and error. There's a lot you can learn, but there's a lot of trial and error. All right, what are your next steps? You got homework. First off, come see me later. I'll be at the Claris booth upstairs from 11:30 to 1. Come ask questions. I have all these files and more live there for you to play around with. We can talk about all these different files. I will be releasing these files next week, I'm hoping. But when I built these files, I always built it with the intention that it would be for the community, for people to learn and to make them better. I do not have the time to continue working on them. If any of you is interested in any one of these and wants to move those files and make them better to share, come see me and I'll give them to you today. Okay? Everybody else will get it next week. But yeah, we'll have live demos, answer questions, we can geek out totally upstairs. There are 2 more AI sessions today. Highly recommend both of them. AI Foundations for Claris FileMaker developers. Ernest Coe, he's got a fantastic session. Highly recommend you to start from the very beginning, talk about different terminology and walk you through all those things. Chris Ippolite has a fantastic session all about showing real-world examples. He's got a ton of experience. He'll show you things in production and how we got them there. I can't stress that out enough. Tomorrow, AI under the hood. Again, today was all about what we have, right? We'll use FileMaker today. Tomorrow is how we're thinking about making that even easier, if that's even possible. So come see Wade's session. It'll be here. And then yours, we have right here. We'll be showing you how to use all these chat AIs in your own development process, which is fantastic. Thanks for coming. All right, beyond that, we have to continue the conversation. Please join us in community. We'll be creating threads and groups so we can start talking about AI, sharing our own experiences, things that we learn. One of the things that I love about this community is how much we help each other out. This is the best development community I have ever been a part of, and it's because of that. Every one of you always participating, helping others out. We have to do this, especially now for AI. All right, what about after that? Here are some things that if you want to continue learning about this, that I recommend you start looking at and looking for some resources. Prompt engineering is one of those. It's a deep rabbit hole. I get it. You're gonna go down, it's very, very deep, but look at least basic understanding of prompt engineering, right? What it takes, different methods, different techniques that are behind it to help you write the best prompts possible to get the outcomes that you want. Start experimenting with open source models. There's a lot of easy ways to, the open source community has grown very, very fast, very quickly, and you can run your own models locally on your own computer for testing, for prototyping, for having a lot of fun. And a couple of softwares out there that make it very easy. Olama, it's prompt-based, so it's all kind of all in the terminal, but it's very easy to set up. It helps you download open source models too. If you want a UI, GPT for All, really nice, gets you up and running very quickly. It even has access through an API, so you can start testing things out. My personal favorite, LM Studio. I'm a Mac user, and it's just so Mac. It's very easy to use. The search in there to find models, and it'll even recommend you, depending on hardware, which one might be best for you. So it's just really nice, really good chat interface. And the API server that it opens up for you to talk to it, really, really well executed. Look into Create ML. It is very, very good, and it's already built into FileMaker. You can, especially if you're using Apple hardware for your users, absolutely recommend looking at Core ML. And then Create ML is a free tool that Apple provides to help you train your own models. And it's dead easy. It's very, very easy. I can use it. So let's, very, very easy to use. And it'll even help you create not just regression models, but also vision models. So do things like object detection and object recognition, which is really cool. Highly recommend you start learning about vector embeddings and semantic search. You saw me yesterday do a quick demo of that. This to me is paramount going forward with AI. It is just really amazing. I'm very excited. We're hoping we can bring that to the tool set very soon, but it's good for you to start learning what those are and some of the use cases for it. Similar, kind of associated with semantic search, is a concept called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG for short. If you search for it, you'll find tons of information about it. It's really about finding the relevant data and sending it to the model along with your request to give it context. Right? That's a quick summary of that. But just go out there, learn a little bit more about it, because I feel that that's going to be something that's very, very common in our future as developers. With that, I am actually amazed that we have time for Q&A. So I'll open it up. Thank you so much. So I think we got like 6 minutes. Oh my God, that's awesome. It's the first time I've done it. Up here.
So is this learning part where you translate your tables and fields to where it's in English so that the model understands what's what? I mean,
The learning part.
How's it generating SQL? It has to understand the tables, it has to understand the fields and the relationships.
So the question is here, how does the model understand, like to generate the SQL, how does it understand my tables and fields that I have? And it's not trained on my tables, but I'm in the prompt, I'm including all that in there. I'm including a list of all my tables, including a list of all my fields per table. In some situations, I'm even including a description, because some of my fields just, yeah, you know. Including some description in there, say, hey, this field is for XYZ, and the state is 2 letters instead of written out. So I include all that information in the prompt. That's context for it.
Same with relationships?
Same with relationships. I let it know, say, this is the primary key, this is a foreign key, these two are, if the names don't automatically imply it, say, hey, this table is related to this in plain text.
Do any of your examples include?
Yes. So yeah. So there's the charting one has an example of that. Fairly basic, but it has an example of that for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Another question back there?
Have you tested your files with open source models?
Have I tested my examples, these files, with open source models? Yes, I have. Yes.
How fast is it?
As fast as my computer is, which is not very. These models require a lot of compute power. And that's why it's still early stages for us to, like, as mere mortals, to run them locally in production, right, at scale. So most of the time, you're going to end up pushing this to the cloud and running on cloud environments, right, that have the power. They heavily rely on GPUs to do a lot of the processing, the number crunching. I've got, a laptop, but yeah. But it runs. And it runs really well. Other questions? No more questions?
Well,
back there?
in one of your examples, the user was putting in a prompt and you were like saving that as a record that they could then go through, like almost like an archive.
Yeah.
How do you keep it so that the archive doesn't get stale if you change your schema?
If I change schema. Was that for the charting one, or?
I think it was the earlier one where they had just like there's plain text on the left. They were like naming their query that they wanted to run.
If they want, yeah. So the question is, if you're saving the prompt, how do you make sure that it's not stale? So because if your schema changes, right, and you send it over, make sure that's the current one. I'm using FileMaker stuff, so I do have a field where I have all my entire schema. There's several ways for you to update that. Ways you can run a custom function to get that schema. But as long as you keep that field up to date, right, that's going to go with your prompt over there. So yeah, it's your job as a developer, right, to make sure that that description is always up to date. Like, AI is not taking our jobs away. It's just shifting our job a little bit. Like, we're still required a lot. Like, there's a lot for us to do there. Yeah.
Have you looked at parsing a FileMaker script and then adding comments and things like that?
Have I looked at having it scan a FileMaker script and adding comments to it? I personally have not. I've seen others do it. Yeah.
I'm really interested. I've tried it, but I haven't sort of mechanized the whole process.
Yeah. There are people who are absolutely doing it. Yeah. Over here?
When you did the query for Sarah for the year of 2022 or something like that,
yeah,
it started with the 6.1 and didn't go from the beginning of the year. So I was wondering, did it actually query her, find out that she only worked, in June? Good.
Yeah. So he was asking in that example where we had it find organizations contacted by Sarah in that date range. So it put the date range in there. But I don't know if you saw, it did put Sarah's name there. So it did constrain it to Sarah, and then it put the date range. The way it wrote the date range is probably not how I would have written it, but that works. That is a valid date range.
I would start with the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Really,
I know. But
wow.
FileMaker's very, like I said, FileMaker's find system is very complex, very robust. But it knows that. There's a lot of examples out there. So yeah.
What about
Over here?
It'd be possible. This comes to the question somebody asked about putting comments in the script.
Yeah.
And that made me think. This seems like this could be. You have old FileMaker scripts, old functions, old. This seems like this might be a good opportunity to send and return back. Send them the script as the prompt. Return back how the language model would do it. Maybe refactored kind of into more modern functions.
Yeah.
Is that something you think would blow up? Or I mean.
Well, Ronnie said, okay. So the question is here, right? Could we use? Let's see if I can summarize it. Could we use this? Could you use these models to help take existing scripts and maybe optimize and rewrite them in different ways? Short answer, yeah. Possibilities really, the possibilities are endless. A lot of these models write stuff in JavaScript and C. It can write very complex code. And it has a huge it's learned from a vast amount of information. So it can do that. I wouldn't be surprised with that. I haven't used it for that yet, but I don't see why not. I think we have time. Maybe one more we'll go over.
For your descriptive search example,
Yeah.
When you prompt with the schema, are you always prompting the entire schema of the database, or do you just give like
what's available on that specific layout.
So he's talking about the finding with natural language. We'll perform the find locally, or using FileMaker's find. Am I sending the entire schema or just what's in the layout? I'm sending only what's in the layout. You could send everything, but I was doing it from the point of view of the user. If I were the user, right, what would I do to find something here? And because one of the intentions that I had for this is as a learning tool. So I remember when I was learning to find FileMaker, it's easy. It's very, it's fine by example. But I was not familiar with all the operators, right? How to search with date ranges. And so this might be a good way to teach new users how to do that. If they can just write what they're looking for, have it pause, and show you, hey, this is what their find request looks like, right? And do that. So how would it be for the user? You could send everything, and it could use it with set fields, but I was doing it in the example itself, it's just what's on the layout. We're out of time. If you want more questions, I will be upstairs later. Once again, thank you so much. If anything, know you can build these things today in FileMaker. Thank you so much.